Emil lived in a tiny apartment above his bakery on Oakwood Lane. Each morning, long before the sun rose, he descended the creaky steps to his shop, dusted the counters, and felt the familiar tug of the big cast iron oven calling him. Baking had been his life's work, and he performed it with care that bordered on reverence. Yet, for all the warmth that his craft offered, Emil carried an unmistakable loneliness. He had arrived in town nearly 2 decades earlier, a newcomer with a soft voice and gentle smile, but never quite found a place to belong. It was an unspoken truth among the locals that Emil's bread was the finest in the region. The fluffy rolls with golden crusts and buttery insides, the cinnamon brioche twisted into delicate loops, and the crusty baguettes that crackled when touched. Everything showcased his devotion. Patrons came in the late mornings and afternoons to buy those sumptuous loaves. They smiled at Emil, offered compliments, praised his artistry, and left. While these interactions were pleasant, none of them ventured beyond small talk. He never seemed to receive invitations to backyard barbecues or holiday gatherings. He remained known, yet unknown, his presence as familiar as the aroma of fresh bread, but ephemeral as a breeze. In the hush of his lonely evenings, Emil sometimes sat by the small window in his apartment. The view overlooked the neighboring buildings, their silhouettes set against a deepening purple sky. He would cradle a mug of tea and wonder whether life might be simpler if he reached out more boldly. But age and habit had settled upon him, and he found it easier to watch from afar than to risk the sting of isolation in a crowd of strangers. One late autumn night, as crisp leaves rustled like parchment across the street, Emil was tidying up after a long day. He had 2 unsold loaves of rye bread left on the counter. Rather than toss them into the dustbin, he wrapped them in thick brown paper. Something compelled him to step out into the darkness with them. Perhaps it was the memory of seeing a single mother who lived a few doors down from the bakery, rummaging through her purse, counting pennies and nickels with tired eyes at the store earlier that day. When he passed her little house on Elm Street, her porch light was out, but the glow of a nearby street lamp illuminated the stoop. Emil placed 1 loaf, still warm, on her doorstep. Before he could second-guess the impulse, he hurried down the sidewalk, leaving no note, no explanation. The second loaf he left in front of a modest cottage whose occupant he didn't know, only that the drawn curtains were seldom parted. His heart thumped with a fluttery excitement as he walked home. He wondered how the recipients would react, perhaps with confusion or a small smile. By early morning, Emil's routine returned, kneading, rolling, shaping dough, but he felt a buoyant energy, a hope he hadn't experienced in a long time. The thought of those warm loaves sitting on someone's doorstep, greeting them in the morning, gave him a new sense of purpose. Could something as small as free bread offer solace to those who felt burdened by life's difficulties? The next evening, after closing the bakery, he held 3 extra loaves. He resolved to deliver them quietly, 2 doors throughout the neighborhood. At each threshold, Emil imagined the occupant waking up, surprised to discover what felt like a small gift. Maybe they would cut a slice to share with someone they loved. Maybe they would freeze half and ration it carefully over the week. In any case, it was a gesture that begged for no thanks. Emil felt the hush of secrecy thrill him. He crept about like a benevolent phantom, warming hearts. Word drifted around town, slowly at first, mysterious bread deliveries by night. Some people wondered if it was part of a marketing campaign. Others guessed it was an odd philanthropic gesture by a local do-gooder. A handful of the recipients left notes taped to their doors, expressing thanks to the unknown benefactor. As the nights went on, Emil's footsteps became more sure. He started selecting different houses with intention. Perhaps those with drawn blinds and stooped shoulders would benefit most from a bit of kindness. Once, he visited a small, dilapidated cottage near the town's edge. He had seen the occupant only once, an older man with solemn eyes peering out from behind the curtains. The front yard was overgrown, shutters askew, as though neglected for years. Yamiel carefully placed a freshly baked baguette on the bottom step. 2 days later, as he passed by the same house in daylight, he noticed the yard had been tidied, the broken shutters repaired. Difficult as it was to believe, something as simple as a loaf of bread might have roused that inhabitant's sense of home, reminding him to care for his surroundings again. The act that began as a whim now shaped Emil's everyday life. He rose at dawn to bake, as always, but kept a few extra loaves aside for nightly excursions. Each evening, he mapped out his path around town, varying which houses he visited. He left bread in a random pattern, ensuring word of the anonymous gift would spread citywide, yet remain unpredictable. As he performed these deliveries, he sometimes caught glimpses along the way. An elderly widow reading by dim light, a sleepless mother tending to a fussy baby, a quiet teenager studying alone at a lamplit desk. Emil felt a pang of kinship with these solitary figures. He too moved in near silence through the night, yearning for a connection beyond the ordinary. On a Tuesday afternoon, when business was slow, Emil saw a woman in his shop, whom he'd noticed many times before, Claire, a teacher from the elementary school. She always wore a kind smile, though it had faded over the last few weeks. She ordered her usual multigrain loaf, but lingered by the display case, as if summoning courage to say more. "This bread you make," Claire said softly. "It's wonderful. My students love it when I share the leftover crusts. It's the highlight of some of their lunch breaks." Her words gave Emil a gentle nudge. "They do?" he asked, a trace of surprise in his voice. It brightens their day," Claire replied, returning his gaze for just a moment before looking away. I've also been hearing stories around town. People are finding bread in mysterious places." Emil tensed slightly, unsure if she suspected him. "Really?" She just nodded. "I overheard an elderly gentleman who said he found a loaf. It made his week, he said. Just goes to show even small acts can mean so much to someone." He took a moment to gather his courage. The compulsion to share something of himself battled against his ingrained reticence. In the end, he only managed a gentle smile. "Indeed, small acts can change a lot." She tilted her head, studying him. Her expression conveyed curiosity, as though she sensed something unsaid. Still, she didn't press the matter. She left soon after, the small bell jingling behind her. Emil resumed his work with a freshly lit spark. Maybe Claire had guessed the identity of the midnight bread magician. Maybe not. Yet hearing how his anonymous gifts had lifted hearts around town reinforced his quiet mission. In time, Emil gathered subtle, encouraging signs. Outside a modest brick house, he spotted a vase of wildflowers on the porch, along with a small note, "Thank you, wonderful stranger." Though he couldn't possibly read the note without exposing himself, he felt his heart swell at the sweet message. By influencing others, he had unintentionally been influenced too. He found he no longer dreaded his evenings alone. Every day held the promise of comforting someone, even if he would never see the direct impact. Then came an unexpected encounter that would forever change his perspective. November winds howled one stormy evening, raking the streets with biting cold. Most houses were dark by early nightfall, shutters latched tight against the chill. Emil had bundled himself in a heavy coat, carrying 3 warm loaves in a large cloth bag. The roads were slick with half-frozen rain, and he stepped carefully. As he neared the old train station, a dilapidated structure on the outskirts of town no longer in use, he noticed a faint glow beneath a broken awning. Drawing closer, he saw a teenage boy, knees tucked up to his chest, a flickering flashlight beside him. The boy's eyes were red from crying, face half buried in the collar of a worn jacket. He startled when Emil approached, looking up with apprehensive eyes. "Sorry," the boy mumbled. "I'll go if you want me to. I don't have anywhere else." Emil shook his head gently, concern blossoming in his chest. He knelt on one knee, ignoring the damp ground. "I'm not here to chase you away. Are you all right?" The boy looked away, biting his lip. "I'm fine," he muttered, though he appeared anything but fine. Emil studied him a moment, silent. He reached into his bag and pulled out a still warm loaf of crusty wheat bread wrapped in a cloth. "Take this, it's fresh." At first, the boy's eyes flashed with suspicion. Then hunger and the smell of fresh bread softened his expression. He accepted it hesitantly, pulling the cloth aside and inhaling. He tore off a small corner and stuffed it into his mouth. Tears welled up in his eyes again, as though the simple warmth and nourishment had triggered something deep inside. Emil sat next to him, sharing in the meager shelter of the awning's overhang. Is there someone you can call? A parent or sibling who can help you get home safely? He asked softly. With a tremor, the boy shook his head. No, not exactly. It took several moments before he elaborated. My mom moved away. My dad. We don't get along. I left the house after a fight. I just need somewhere to clear my head, but I'm so cold, and I haven't eaten since morning. Emil frowned, his heart constricting. I know a place in town, the community center. They have cots, hot meals. I can walk you there if you'd like. The boy glanced warily in the direction of the distant glow of streetlights. After another hungry bite of bread, he nodded. Okay. They walked back toward town, the storm swirling in the wind around them. Though so much remained unspoken, there was now a quiet companionship between them. When they reached the community center, Emil spoke briefly with the volunteer at the front desk, explaining the situation. The older woman, wearing a knitted cap and a kind smile, guided the boy toward a warm common area. Though the boy didn't say much, he cast a grateful look over his shoulder. Emil waved goodnight, his chest tight with both sorrow for the boy's predicament and a small glimmer of hope he'd done what he could. The next day, Emil rose once more before dawn. He reflected on how a single loaf had opened a conversation and a secure place for that struggling teenager. While his nightly deliveries remained anonymous, this experience made him wonder if occasionally stepping out of the shadows could inspire deeper change. Then again, his quiet, solitary nature continually retreated from the idea of recognition. Perhaps it was enough just to do good. That morning, as he shaped dough into plump ovals, he heard the bell above the bakery door. He wasn't used to visitors at such an hour, so he poked his head out from behind the counter. To his surprise, it was the same teenage boy from the night before. He stood there uncertainly in an oversized jacket, eyes a little less haunted. Emil wiped flour from his hands and approached. You're up early, Emil remarked kindly. The boy swallowed hard. I just wanted to say thanks. The community center let me stay the night. I'm going to talk to my dad today, try and work things out. But first, I just needed to say thank you. Emil's cheeks grew warm. I'm glad you're okay, he said earnestly, realizing that was the best expression of gratitude he could have asked for. The boy wrestled with his own awkwardness, then his eyes brightened as he looked around. Are you the one who's been leaving bread at people's houses? He asked suddenly. For a moment, Emil felt his heart skip a beat, though he forced a soft laugh. You're not supposed to ask that. It's meant to be a mystery. A small smile twitched on the teenager's face. It's kind of obvious. Nobody else bakes bread like you do. He paused, gaze drifting to the racks of fresh dough. People talk about you in town, you know. They say your bread is the best around, and folks have started sharing those loaves with each other. It's like one good deed starts another. It's pretty cool. Somehow, that small measure of recognition felt less terrifying than Emil had anticipated. He mustered a nod of acceptance. I'm glad. It's nice to think we can care for each other in little ways. Feeling a stirring of courage, he added, if you ever need help, or even if you just want to talk, you can come here. There was a moment's hesitation, then the boy nodded, smiled, and left. Emil realized he hadn't even asked for the boy's name, an oversight that he promised himself to correct if there was a next time. Watching the retreating figure, Emil's heart felt unexpectedly light. Sometimes a small kindness was the difference between desperation and hope. In the following nights, Emil resumed his routine, but with a renewed perspective. He wasn't just leaving bread on doorsteps as an abstract gesture. He was imagining all the faces tied to each home. He pictured the parents feeding children a hearty breakfast, the solitary man or woman savoring a slice, the lonely souls who might feel a little less alone if they knew someone was thinking of them. Gradually, the entire community seemed to be catching that spirit. More often now, Emil spotted small acts as he walked the town at night. A front yard bench with a note inviting passerby to sit and rest, A plastic bin of coats labeled, "Take one if you're cold," and even a neighbor helping to repair a broken window across the street. It was as if the darkness had receded just enough to reveal how capable people were of being kind, and it became a small domino effect. In that revelation, Emil found a measure of belonging he'd longed for. No longer merely an observer, he felt himself part of a growing web of compassion. One evening at closing time, Claire arrived at the bakery. The shop had emptied, and Emil was sweeping flour from the floor. She approached the counter with a gentle grin. "I heard some talk at the school," she said in greeting. "A couple of parents were raving about a loaf of bread that appeared on their porch. They said it was from the same mysterious giver. Their kids asked me if I knew anything about it." Emil couldn't resist smiling. "There are many mysteries in this town, apparently," he offered. Despite the tease in his voice, he felt his pulse race, waiting to see if Claire would press further. To his surprise, she simply placed a bakery bag on the counter. "It's not bread," she explained. From the bag, she pulled out small pastries shaped like miniature hearts. "I'm no great baker, but I tried." "These are for you." "Thank you," Emil said, genuinely touched, though uncertain what to make of the gesture. "I've been watching you all these years. You're so dedicated to your craft, always bringing light in small ways. I just wanted to do something to say I appreciate you." She parked her hands on the counter, looking down to hide a nervous flush. "I, for one, suspect you might be the mysterious bread leaver. But I won't pry if you want to keep your secret." Emil stared at the heart-shaped pastries, warmth washing over him. He realized, suddenly, that this was the connection he'd longed for, someone reaching out in return. Perhaps, in the quiet tapestry of nighttime generosity, he'd softened the boundaries he'd built around himself. "Thank you," he repeated, voice catching. "They looked delicious." In realizing how small acts of kindness had moved others, Emil discovered that he was no longer quite so lonely. He found himself discussing recipes with Claire, suggestions for her dough, possible herbs and spices. She took notes with sincere interest. Their conversation flowed, casual yet meaningful, until he walked her to the door and bid her good night. After she left, he closed up the bakery with a sense that his existence had bloomed out from behind his solitary walls. When December arrived, the evening air took on a sharper chill, and holiday decorations peeked from windows. Emil continued his custom, though fewer folks ventured outdoors at night. Sometimes he had to push aside a small mound of snow on a porch to place the bread. Occasionally, he slipped on ice, but the dizzying excitement of delivering midnight gifts spurred him on. He marveled at how large and bright the moon seemed on cold, clear nights, and how the hush of snow-laden streets felt almost holy. On a blisteringly cold evening just before Christmas, a community potluck was planned at the town square. Emil hesitated. These events typically saw large turnouts, families with boisterous children and couples walking hand in hand. He feared the sense of isolation he might feel among them. Still, he decided to bake 2 trays of sweet rolls studded with raisins and topped with sugar glaze to contribute. Stepping outside as dusk settled, hands carefully balancing the trays, he made his way under the softly glowing street lamps. The town square was alight with festive strands of bulbs, their reflections dancing in the snow. People bustled about, placing dishes on a long communal table. Emil tried to slip in quietly, adding his contributions without attracting attention, but hardly a minute passed before someone recognized him. "He's the baker from Oakwood Lane," exclaimed a woman collecting coats at a side table. Instantly, a throng of grateful murmurs surrounded him. A father approached with his child perched on his arm. "I found one of your loaves on our porch last month," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "We had just lost my job. That bread fed my family that evening and gave me hope during a really dark time." "Thank you." An older man with a neatly trimmed beard chimed in. "I received one too. You'll never know how much that small gesture did for me." Seeing the crowd grow, Emil's cheeks flushed. Nerves gnawed at him, but a deeper warmth eclipsed that fear. He realized people truly appreciated his silent gestures, and now they were returning that kindness with gratitude. Claire caught his eye across the crowd and smiled widely. She came up and looped her arm through his, guiding him toward the line of tables. "You should stay," she whispered gently. Let people see who you are. Maybe let them thank you properly? Breathing unsteadily, Emil let himself be led to a seat. The local choir sang carols. Neighbors lined up to sample the many homemade dishes. Children ran around, shrieking with delight in the lightly falling snow. As Emil sat, perplexed at the sudden outpouring of companionship, a silver-haired lady approached him, tears shining in her eyes. She introduced herself as Margot. "My granddaughter lives with me," she said softly. Her mother, my daughter, laughed unexpectedly. "We've been scraping by on my retirement. Between bills and groceries, the budget is so tight. Then one night we found a loaf of wonderful bread on the porch. The next night, another. It filled my granddaughter's belly when otherwise I might have had to skip a meal. I always prayed for a miracle. And there it was. So simple, yet it gave me courage. Reminded me, we aren't alone." Emil listened with a hand pressed to his chest. "I'm so glad," he whispered. He never intended to bring tears or grand speeches, but hearing Margot's story helped him realize that kindness resonates far beyond the moment. As the evening wore on, he found himself at the heart of the gathering, receiving hugs and heartfelt thanks. Any anxiety he'd carried about his anonymity vanished, replaced by a realization that these connections were an extension of the very generosity he had set out to share. People needed each other, and while his bread was just one small beacon, the community had rallied behind it, strengthening the collective spirit. At the end of the potluck, Emil stepped aside, slipping into a corner to catch his breath. The teenage boy from the train station ambled up, shy but purposeful. He was better dressed than before, a sign he'd reconciled with his father. "Never got to tell you my name," he said quietly. "I'm Alex. My dad's over there picking up some leftovers. We talked things through." Emil's face lit up. "That's wonderful, Alex." Alex shuffled his feet. "That night, I really thought about doing something drastic. I figured no one cared. Then you showed up with that bread, and it changed my mind. Just wanted you to know." Emil swallowed hard, tearing up at the magnitude of the boy's confession. "I'm so glad you found a reason to stay," he said softly. They shared a moment of understanding before Alex wandered off, waves of relief and gratitude evident in his posture. Emil closed his eyes, inhaling the crisp air, letting that knowledge wash over him. It was a humbling privilege to have influenced a life in such a crucial way. He suddenly recognized that in offering warmth to others, he had also been healing his own loneliness. As the night wound down, Claire drifted toward him again. The swirl of holiday music and conversation served as a warm background to their conversation. "You've done something special," she said, her voice far away yet intimate. "People might have found ways to be kind anyway, but you led by example." "I just baked bread," Emil replied simply, shaking his head. "I never guessed it would spread so far." "Sometimes the smallest gestures have the biggest echoes," she replied, a twinkle in her eyes. "I'm glad you found your voice through your gift." Against the backdrop of the town's cheerful lights, Emil felt, for the first time, that he might no longer be simply a lonely figure in the background. He had woven himself into the tapestry of the community, and while baking bread had always been his life's work, it now carried a significance bigger than feeding bodies. It fed hearts and spirits, too. In the new year that followed, Emil continued his deliveries, though less in secret now that many people knew his kind secret. Yet, even though they recognized the source, they never tried to stop him. Early morning or late at night, he would quietly place a loaf or two on a doorstep or in someone's mailbox slot. The gesture still retained its special glow, an offering of hope, no strings attached. He sometimes found goodies in return, handwritten notes, crocheted pot holders left near the doorstep of his bakery, homemade jams from appreciative neighbors. A reciprocal chain of giving flowed through the community. People became aware of each other's trials and triumphs. They started reaching out themselves, delivering groceries to the sick, helping to fix a neighbor's roof, or simply stopping by to see how someone was doing. Emila, in turn, discovered a new sense of fulfillment that went beyond the satisfaction of seeing dough rise perfectly in the oven. He realized acts of kindness had the power to tear down the walls of isolation, his own and others. The sense of belonging he had craved was right there all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to step forward. On a sunny afternoon, as Emile tidied his shop, he glimpsed Claire outside, leading a small group of students on a nature walk along the sidewalk. She caught sight of him through the window, waved, and mouthed a cheerful hello. Encouraged, he stepped out briefly and greeted the children, offering them a sampling of small baguette slices. Their faces lit up with delight, and Emile beamed at Claire. She gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder and whispered, "They might not remember all the math I teach, but they'll remember the taste of kindness." In that instant, Emile felt a tingle of gratitude for bread, for warmth, for community. His heart brimming, he returned to the shop where dough waited, needing to be shaped and placed carefully on floured boards. Each new loaf felt like a small invitation to hope, reminding him that sometimes the most modest tokens of care could soften the hardest burdens and mend the most fragile spirits. And for Emile, every whiff of yeast that filled the air was a gentle reminder of how easy it could be to transform grains, water, and salt into a quiet revolution of kindness, one warm loaf at a time.